You know, when you look out over a calm lake, it's easy to just see one big, uniform pool of water. But today, we're going to see that beneath that placid surface lies this incredibly complex, structured world, all divided into distinct layers. So let's dive in and take this fascinating journey from the sunlit shallows all the way down to the dark, silent lakebed.
So that brings us right to the big question. Why isn't a lake just, well, a lake? Why does it have all these different zones? The answer, it turns out, reveals this hidden ecosystem, shaped by invisible forces like sunlight, temperature, and oxygen that create totally unique neighborhoods for all kinds of aquatic life.
Here's the plan for our virtual dive. We'll start with the basics, what even creates these zones. Then we're going to explore each layer, one by one, the littoral, the limnetic, the profundal, and the benthic. And finally, we'll connect all the dots and see why this layering is just so crucial for a lake's health.
Right, so let's get into the fundamentals. Before we can really explore the zones themselves, we have to understand the powerful environmental forces that are actually creating them in the first place.
It really all boils down to three key things. First, how far sunlight can actually get down into the water. Second, how that water separates into warm and cold layers. And third, just how much oxygen is available at different depths. You could say these three gradients are basically the architects of the entire lake ecosystem.
Okay, our descent begins right in the shallows, the vibrant area you're probably most familiar with. This is the littoral zone, and you can think of it as the bustling coastline of the lake world. Okay, so formally, the littoral zone is the area from the dry shore that slopes down into the water. But what's really amazing about it is its key characteristic. It's this incredible zone of equilibrium. It's like a perfectly balanced energy budget for the lake. Everything the plants produce through photosynthesis is almost perfectly matched by what all the local creatures use just by breathing. It's pretty amazing.
And this shows that not all littoral zones are created equal. The actual physical shape of the lake matters a ton. So in deep, nutrient-poor lakes, we call those oligotrophic, the sides are really steep, which means you get a very narrow shoreline habitat. But in shallower, nutrient-rich eutrophic lakes, the gentle slopes create this wide, sprawling littoral zone that is just teeming with life.
This zone is really the lake's primary nursery and its pantry. I mean, the entire food web starts right here. You've got rooted plants like cattails anchored to the bottom, countless tiny floating phytoplankton, which are basically microscopic plants, and then mats of algae. They all work together to make this zone an absolute powerhouse of productivity.
All right, let's push off from the shore and head out into the vast, open water. This is the limnetic zone, the great blue expanse of the lake.
So, the limnetic zone is simply all the open water away from the influence of the shore. But here's the crucial point. It is not one uniform area. It's actually split vertically into two completely different worlds, and the one thing that divides them is sunlight.
And these two sections are the Euphotic zone, which literally means well-lit, and the Aphotic zone, meaning without light, which, as you'll see, we also call the Profundal zone. One is a bright, warm, productive factory, and the other, well, it's a dark, cold, and quiet space.
This here is the engine room of the open lake. It's located in that warm, wind-mixed upper layer of water that scientists call the epilimnium. But really, all you need to remember is that this zone is defined by one single thing: sunlight. It's where all the photosynthesis happens, powering the phytoplankton that form the base of the entire open water food web.
And now, we leave the light behind. We sink deeper into the cold and the dark. Welcome to the Profundal zone, the deep water realm of the lake. So the Profundal zone is a world apart. It's separated from the warm surface water by this sharp, invisible barrier, where the temperature just plummets. That gradient is called the thermocline, and it effectively locks this cold bottom layer, the hypolimnion, away from the world above. It pretty much prevents mixing for most of the year.
You know, life down here really plays by a different set of rules. There's no light, so that means no plants. And because there's no mixing with the surface, oxygen levels can get dangerously low, especially in the summer. That's why you typically find very few fish down here. It's a really challenging place to make a living.
We've reached the bottom. Our final stop is the benthic zone. The sediment, the soil, the muck that makes up the lake floor itself. And believe me, this isn't just mud. It is a vital, active part of the ecosystem. I absolutely love this description. The benthic zone is the lake's digestive system. Just think about it. Everything that dies in the water above, algae, plants, animals. It eventually sinks and ends up right here, to be processed. And here's how that digestion works. First, all that organic material from above settles on the bottom. Then, this massive army of bacteria gets to work, decomposing it all. In the process, they break it down into simple nutrients, which are then available to be recycled back into the system. This whole process uses up a lot of oxygen, which is why an overloaded system can lead to dead zones. And here's a fascinating detail. You can literally read a lake's history just by looking at its bottom. As a lake gets older, this layer of organic sediment in the benthic zone just slowly gets thicker and thicker, year after year after year.
Okay, so we visited every zone from top to bottom. Now, let's pull it all together and ask the big question. So what? Why does this layered structure actually matter so much?
This table sums it up perfectly. As you go from the surface down to the deep, you see these absolutely dramatic shifts. Sunlight just disappears. The temperature drops, and dissolved oxygen plummets. It's these powerful environmental gradients that are the entire reason a lake isn't just one big pool of water. They're the forces that build these distinct underwater worlds.
And this zonation is ecologically vital. It creates this huge variety of habitats, which allows so many different types of organisms to coexist. It concentrates all the sun-powered productivity in those upper layers, and it establishes the deep zones as the critical recycling center. By understanding these zones, we can actually read the story of a lake's health and its age.
So, the next time you see a lake, remember that it's not a single thing. It's a community of interconnected zones, a vertical ecosystem where the busy, sunlit shoreline and the quiet, dark depths all depend on each other to function as a whole.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We've seen that the benthic and profundal zones are the lake's digestive and recycling system. So, what do you think would happen to that vibrant, sunlit world at the surface if the system at the bottom suddenly just shut down and that flow of nutrients stopped? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this exploration.